to start now, because I came to the stage. Go on. Thanks very much. Basil now will be making the introductions. He's just making his way to the stage. So we'll be starting momentarily, just making sure all the microphones work so that you can hear us all.
So, is it on? Hello? Yes. Okay. Hi. Well, thank you very much all for coming here today. This is the fifth installment of our Big Data in Cybersecurity. It's, we hope to be the most interesting and bigger than any other time. It's going to be over 2 days, as you all know, so hopefully most of you will be here tomorrow. Our speakers and the people who are here to help with the conference are coming from a lot of different organizations, universities, the Scottish government. We are, Cyber Academy is a part of the university, part of the School of Computing that is organizing this event. And I'm happy to be the manager of the Cyber Academy for the last 2 years. We are having the Cyber Academy has as its current strategy to create new strategic partnerships with businesses and other organizations from the industry, government, professional bodies, and bring them into the university to work together, create world-class conferences and attract industry leaders and top academics from around the world. And today we have some of them with us, and organize public awareness events that will benefit society as a whole. One of the most important projects we ran this year was a cybersecurity taster for a neurodiverse audience. It was deemed to be a very big success. We had a great retention rate, and we're still evaluating the findings from this course. Some of the people who participated are actually still here today with us. The pilot was funded by the Scottish government, and hopefully we'll be running more of these courses really soon. Many of the people who attended are now considering a career in cybersecurity, studying either in a university or college level, or through more practical means like apprenticeships. There was part of the strategic businesses objectives actually is our partnerships. And our partnerships with some of the organizations based here in Edinburgh have proven to be very important. I have to say, first of all, Royal London is becoming a platinum supporter of the Cyber Academy, and that's thanks to Ivan here, who is a graduate from the university. ECI Security, again, a relationship that has grown up through Harry McLaren, one of our other graduates. I have to say that ECI Security is the single largest recruiter of graduates from our MSc program. Am I allowed to say that, Harry? So this year, 9 out of 10 people hired in their SOC were actually from Napier. So that's a big number. And ID Cyber Solutions is the third business that is joining us, and will be delivering joint training together. Now, for the coming year, 2019-20, we've got a lot of conferences planned. There's a big blockchain conference that's going to be on in September, Big Data in Health later in October. Adrian Smales here is going to be running that. We've got cybersecurity in education. That's one of Bill's projects. Two smaller conferences, one in phishing and one in fake news as a cyber threat. Sometime in September, we'll be running a mega cyber meetup, where the biggest meetups in Edinburgh in the field of cybersecurity, blockchains and IoT will come together to a really big event. So please follow our website and our social media. And we're going to have 2 GDPR events this year. The one's going to be the 500 days, and the other one's going to be next year, 2 years and 2 days. That makes sense for the calendar. We got 2 acclaimed speakers coming in later on this month. Bruce Nair is one of them. Andreas Antonopoulos, another guru in blockchain, is going to be joining us. Both these speakers are here on the same day, on the 19th of June. More information at the reception outside. And we plan to have to deliver a lot of training with the Cyber Academy in our SOC lab, incident response for managers and for IT professionals. Both me and Adrian are going to be involved in that one, delivering some Splunk, cryptography, digital evidence for legal professionals. That's going to be together with the Law Society of Scotland, Cyber Combat, QRadar, and a lot more. And next May is our birthday, our 5th birthday. So there's going to be a party, and everybody will be welcome. Again, follow our social media, and you'll find out the details. Some of the organizations that we work with right now, and we are building our relationships, are the Law Society of Scotland, Full Proxy, who are working with F5, and Symantec, Palo Alto, QA, and the Scottish Paralegal Association. Last but not least, I would like to thank our sponsors for today, CIXA, which is sponsoring the academic stream, Full Proxy, and 7 Elements. So thank you very much all for being here, and we'll start with the next, the first actually speaker. Okay, so Mr. Sokratis Katsikas. So, Bill, is it recording?
It's recording.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
I have my own
You got
portable
one.
mic. Yeah, that's fine.
And this is a clicker.
Is it also a pointer?
Yes.
Okay. I guess. No.
No, this
Wrong,
is the black screen.
Yes. Okay. So where's the pointer?
The pointer. Sorry. It should be this one.
Is it? No.
No.
I have my own. So don't worry.
Sorry.
If it doesn't work, don't worry. And I might not even need it. Don't worry, Basil.
I don't think the pointer will work with the screen. So.
You may be right. No, it does.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay, you want to plug yours?
Tools of the trade always work. Yeah. Okay. So good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Many thanks to the organizers for the opportunity to be here with you today, for the invitation and the opportunity to be with you today and talk with you about the challenges that arise from our new endeavor and paradigm shift in computing. The last one having been cloud computing or fog computing, but the new one being integrating IT with OT. You see, in terms of security, we keep doing fatal mistakes. Originally, we connected inherently insecure machines over an inherently insecure communication channel, the internet, and we ended up with the mess we have today. Now, this was not enough, and we are connecting even more insecure devices to all this mess. So what do you expect? Challenges, so many of them which we don't even know how to address. Some of them we know how to address, but still open questions, a lot of them. So a few words on where I come from. I have more than one hat, but today I'm wearing the NTNU hat, the Norwegian University of Science and Technology. I'm a professor there. I'm leading the Critical Infrastructure Security and Resilience group at the Center for Cyber and Information Security within the Department of Information Security and Communications Technology. Now, CCIS is a public-private venture. We have about 25 partners from industry and government, so CCIS is fully supported by them, and also the Department of Justice of the Norwegian government, with the overall aim of bridging academia to the real the real world. And NTNU is the largest university, of course, in Norway, with about 40,000 students now. We tend to believe it's the best as well, even though our colleagues at the University of Oslo might have a different opinion on this. But it's a research-intensive university with more than 500 PhDs awarded every year. Now, enough of this. Let's get into the actual talk. As Industry 4.0 is part of the title, in good academic tradition, let me just say a few words about Industry 4.0. Possibly for those among you that possibly are not familiar with the term. Obviously, since this is the fourth, there have been three before this one. The first one happened in the UK, actually, in the 18th century. And the enabling technology there, because all of them were driven by some new technology or some new application, was the steam, the power of steam. So it happened started in the 18th century. Mostly evident in the manufacturing process, the clothing industry at the time. The second one happened around the 1930s, in the US. The enabling technology was electricity, of course, and it manifested itself mostly with mass production and assembly lines, mostly in the automobile industry. The third one is much more recent, in the beginning of the 21st century, or the end of the 20th. And the enabling technology was, of course, IT. The fourth one is the one that we experience today. And the main element here is the convergence of IT with operational technology. So the introduction of information technology into the process, the industrial process at large. And the end result is what we call cyber-physical systems. There are several enabling technologies that have allowed this evolution. It's not a revolution, it's mostly an evolution, I would say. So you would say that the enabling technologies behind Industry 4.0, what drives the new evolution are new devices. The IIoT is the industrial Internet of Things. We focus on this rather than the Internet of Things at large. Machine-to-machine communication, those of you working on big data analytics have their place in there, and so on and so forth, technologies that you will be able to recognize. I don't need to go through all of them. And, well, it manifests itself into many industrial areas with right now a focus, an emphasis on smart manufacturing. That doesn't mean that other areas in industry are not influenced by these developments. Now, all these will create some security challenges. But before going into that, let me give you a reference model, an architectural reference model for what is called the Industry 4.0 factory of the future, focusing on manufacturing technology, on smart manufacturing, but also this can apply to any other industrial process, more or less. So several levels here underlying the manufacturing processes and the equipment, what we have already today. This already exists, but then you can see several levels above that with industrial control and supervision devices and systems, 2 levels here, with sensors and actuators, with SCADA systems and PLCs and RTUs, distributed control systems and human-machine interfaces, and then the upper levels of all that, the highest, of course, being the cloud, because everything now is on the cloud. Personally, I don't think this is a good idea, but anyway, this is the trend. So we will move towards this anyway, to the cloud and to mobile computing. So this is how this looks like. Well, this is really nice. I mean, it's brilliant, right? It's a great idea, but it doesn't come for free because, unfortunately, there are some, well, How should we call them? Not exactly angels, okay? All reversed angels out there. And all this creates tremendous opportunities for these guys. So usually, what these guys can do, and they couldn't do when the manufacturing process was limited to this, or at most to this, they can get in all this model through the upper layer, which of course is open to the outside world. One of the ways, and in fact I think this is the most frequent one, Steve will talk about, the human factor is always the weakest link in the chain. And you don't really need to revert to sophisticated types of attacks to get into a system like that. You would probably get much more chances of success if you just employed social engineering techniques, one of which, of course, is phishing to get legitimate credentials of getting into the system. That's what experience says. Now, once up there, you can walk your way and work your way through down to the last or the first level, which is actually the manufacturing process. Some may wonder, but surely we do have protection mechanisms between the layers, don't we? Well, yes, we do. And in theory, layers are air-gapped in between. But unfortunately, air gaps are not airtight, usually. So this is entirely possible, and in fact, experience has shown that this has happened many times, it's still happening, and it will, I'm afraid, continue to happen in the near future. So, let's see why. Well, maybe I'll put all those. Originally, I had thought of giving them one by one to you, but maybe it's better to do that to stay within the time limits. Oops. Okay. The first one, characteristic of all this Industry 4.0 model, which you don't find in pure IT systems, is the requirement for resilience. We cannot assume that the overall system will be secure. We must assume that it will be attacked, it will be successfully attacked, and therefore it should be able to still function even at a reduced capacity or functionality under attack. You can't simply shut it down. Imagine that an Industry 4.0 paradigm is, of course, the smart grid by itself. Can you imagine the smart grid shutting itself down because of an attack? Well, it could, but that's not a good idea. Then, there is a convergence between safety and security. Whenever you mix or you join IT and OT, through this model, you can get access through the IT to the OT. And that means that you can affect the physical process underneath the cyber process. Now, that in turn means that when we design systems like that, we should take care that both safety and security are taken into account. And this is not trivial to do, particularly because most of these systems had been designed in the past with safety in mind. They have been optimized with safety in mind. Now, if a security engineer attempts to change the requirements of a system, the design specification of a system, to instill security on top of safety, and imagine what? You have conflicting requirements most of the time. How do you handle this? Well, the response, of course, the answer is that you should take care of specifying, making all these specifications jointly from the beginning so that you don't have conflicts. This is easier said than done. All these systems have a nature of systems, federated things, and in fact, this goes together with scalability. Imagine an industrial process that also incorporates wireless sensor networks. People do put additional wireless sensor networks in the factory or the industrial process at any time. So it needs to be scalable, but this creates security challenges. And the systems nature creates the following difficulty. This is not a really characteristic of convergence between IT and OT. It applies to IT alone as well, but it's more pronounced here. Suppose that we have two components which we know that individually are secure. They meet some security requirements. Do we know what will happen if we put them together? Will the end result be secure? There's no way of knowing that, unless you revert to formal techniques, which are not really very useful when you talk about large-scale systems. Interaction with the physical world means that we should take threats and attacks much more seriously than we do in IT, simply because they can result in physical damage as well, or in damage to health, or even to injury to people. These processes that are underlying the cyber part of Industry 4.0 model, they are usually time-aware and deadline-sensitive. The usual answer of security experts, or not so much experts, not so that experts, when asked how they are going to secure a process or a communication, would be that they would use encryption. And indeed, encryption is nowadays the most frequently used tool for securing communications, at least, or not only communications, but storage. And it is a paradigm that has been ported over several computing paradigms up till now. So even in this case, one would be tempted to say, okay, why don't we use encryption to encrypt our communication and all that? Well, it would have been a good idea, but sometimes by encrypting communications in an industrial process, you do much more harm than an attacker would do if you didn't have them encrypted, simply because of the time criticality of the underlying process. Encryption has this unfortunate disadvantage of being quite slow. So we need to come up with lightweight encryption mechanisms, which we have not yet. Add to this the fact that all this computation, or most of this computation in industrial processes, is performed in resource-constrained devices. So it's not only time-critical process that you're handling, but also you try to handle that with a restrained resources platform. There is a need to accommodate in-place business processes in such systems. What does that mean? Authentication, right? Yes. Should we use biometrics? Yes, of course. It's a very secure means of authentication. Can you use biometrics in the control room of a power plant? Yes, you can. But you would be sacrificing the availability of the system. And you cannot do that, because you simply need to have the system available to the operator, available at an instance. And you cannot afford to use complex biometrics, biometric authentication mechanisms to do that. Do we have solutions? Yes, we do. But they are not yet commercially available. In fact, they have not even left the lab, most of them. There is a requirement for always on. If an IT system needs to be updated or to be patched security-wise, well, you can always bring it down. You can't bring down a power plant. You can't bring down a factory. You can't bring down the smart grid. You can't bring down any of those things. So you have to find ways of doing all this with the system on, and it's a nightmare. Dynamic domain of use. People come and go. Roles come and go in such environments. So if you try to manage keys, for example, authentication keys, between autonomous vehicles, let's take another example. This is a federation whose members change possibly every minute. You can't simply use the traditional ways of managing keys. Difference of a life cycle between IT and OT systems. Well, as we all know, IT has a very short life cycle. Things change rapidly. Manufacturing technology, mechanical equipment, electrical equipment do not change that frequently. So you find in a power plant, you may find equipment whose lifetime exceeds 50 years and is designed to exceed 50 years. Can you make sure, even if you can ensure, that this type of equipment will be compatible with your security solutions today, that it will be compatible still with your security solutions after 50 years? That's quite a challenge. There's still some more of a technical nature. Okay. By definition, Industry 4.0 is based on, at least partially, new devices, IoT devices. None of these have been designed with security in mind. They have been designed with functionality in mind. That means that they are inherently vulnerable. It's exactly the same thing, the same mistake that we did when we originally used PCs, which had been designed for an entirely different purpose, and ported them for use in critical applications, in the office or in production. Increased connectivity because of wireless networks. This was also touched upon before. We have a complexity of the supply chain, and this is, well, this is not so much of a technical nature, but blockchain people will, of course, be familiar with the trend of using smart contracts between elements or components of the supply chain. Now, this is a great idea, right? Because it increases productivity, it makes things easier, but at the same time, it means that you open up parts of your system to external entities, and this creates a challenge by itself. Legacy industrial control systems. Would you be surprised if I told you that Windows XP for industry are still being used in industry and in critical industry, as a matter of fact? I guess some of you would not. But even those of you would be surprised if I told you that still there exist DOS machines in industrial systems. Controlling critical functionalities. Dealing with this is usually a neglected issue. You know, in research, we usually have a trend of looking to the future. Right? So we now research ways of designing the future systems. But this is not enough in this case. We need to look at how to take care of legacy systems, because we will always have legacy systems there. The industrial Internet of Things by itself poses a challenge, mainly because it is based on insecure protocols. The industrial protocols, again, were never designed, communication protocols, were never designed with security in mind, simply because security was not an issue, because they were designed at a time when it was implicitly assumed that in order to hack a protocol, you would have to be physically present, and this was taken care otherwise. Now, this is not the case anymore, so you can get through that from top of the model to the bottom. I already hinted about the interconnection between the logical and the physical world that takes place because of this IT and OT convergence, and this results in threats that we have never experienced before, and they are called cyber-physical threats because it's a combination of cyber and physical threats. Old equipment, or even modern equipment in industry, is very frequently having unused functionalities. This is the dream of a hacker, an unused functionality. No one knows about it. Usually it's not configured. It's not configured at all. So you would expect default passwords or even no passwords to be there. And this is typical. On the human side, every transformation, every digital transformation of this form brings about organizational and behavioral changes, and this affects security as well. Just one example. Do we know how the future worker or the current worker will cooperate with a robotic arm when they are actually collaborating and not just working independently? This is expected to bring about behavioral changes, and these do indirectly affect security. I will come to those two later on, so as part of the solutions that we have, so let's not call them challenges at this point. Now, when trying to organize a discussion to give an overview of solutions in any area, I always have a problem organizing that, and I have found a way of doing it, which, well, maybe is appropriate. Some of you may recognize in this the Nist framework for improving the cybersecurity of critical infrastructures. What it does, it actually takes you by hand from the beginning of the life cycle of any cybersecurity program in an organization, which is to identify your needs and your requirements, deploy the protective measures, deploy detective measures, and then respond and recover. So this is one way of organizing the discussion about what we have done. Under identify, terms that usually come up are risk analysis, vulnerability analysis, threat modeling, attack investigation, penetration testing, security requirements, elicitation, and so on. There has been quite an extensive amount of research done regarding primarily risk analysis for systems that have a cyber and a physical part, for IT and OT systems, or for cyber physical systems. Remember that the related challenge there is that when we do a risk analysis for such systems, we should take care jointly of security and safety. Now, there have been several methodologies for doing that. The problem is that all of them are domain-specific, simply because the safety requirements, the safety needs are domain-specific. So you can't come up with a generic method for risk analysis of such systems as, for example, the ISO 27005 standard. There is no way of doing this. It's not a simple plug-in into the workflow of the 27005. So there is still open room for that. Same for vulnerability analysis. Vulnerability analysis in all these devices is not an easy task to do. Threat modeling is quite different if you consider the fact that we are talking also about cyber-physical threats and adversarial models that cannot be found in pure IT systems. Attack investigation is something interesting. In a purely IT system, of course, we can test attacks, and we can test our cybersecurity solutions as well. And we do have cyber ranges for doing this, right? Well, in Industry 4.0 systems, you can't possibly experiment with a live system. It's not a good idea. You can't take a smart grid or a factory and install countermeasures and then launch attacks against it to see whether your countermeasures will work. Not a good idea at all. So what we need to come up with is the equivalent of cyber ranges for such kinds of systems. Now, these can be called, it's a term my team has coined, cyber-physical ranges, but of course the architecture of these is quite different than an IT, pure IT cyber range. And it would need to have not only real hardware parts, but also emulated and simulated parts, because you can't simply make a test bed that would resemble a large-scale industrial installation. Techniques for penetration testing in such systems are emerging. No real standardization there yet. Quite an open area for research. as well as tools and methodologies for putting together security requirements. There are several tools, of course, for eliciting security requirements in IT systems. Some of them, researchers have now started to work on extending them to include cyber-physical systems, including safety requirements as well. Again, they would have to be domain specific. In our lab, we're doing some work on this with Secure Tropos in the maritime domain right now. So for the cyber-enabled ships. Under protection, there are three major categories of solutions that have appeared in the literature for such types of systems. These are hardware security measures, the usual stuff about secure execution environments in several varieties. That's one area. Another area is securing the communication channels, and one of the prominent research areas there is how can we explore the fifth generation 5G communication systems within such environments. We're now starting a project, a Horizon project. In fact, the kickoff meeting is tomorrow, and I can't be there, on using SDN for securing the smart grid. And general protection approaches have also been proposed, but I would say that the real message is here that you can't really come up with a one-size-fits-all approach, because that would not be efficient. Comment about the encryption algorithms has been made already, and since there are several people here interested in blockchain technology, we are using it also in my lab in several projects for securing device integrity in industrial settings or even smart home settings. It works, but well, there are other ways of doing it as well. But of course, this is a sexy thing. I mean, blockchain is something that is high on research now. My guess is that the expectations are higher than what we will be eventually able to deliver. This is not strange. Remember the case with artificial intelligence back in the 60s and the 70s? Artificial intelligence was promising the world. But unfortunately, it didn't deliver. Well, it does deliver now. Why? Because, of course, the computational power is there, and the data, the big data are there, so that AI tools and techniques can effectively be used. Perhaps, I hope, something like that will happen with blockchain technology, but not yet. Under detection, we usually speak about intrusion detection for industrial control systems, such systems, convergent IT, OT, let's say. And the characteristics there, of course, machine learning is a prominent technology which is being used, but also there are several specific things that need to be considered when you design an IDS for such systems. One of them, the most important, I would say, is that you can't simply port the logic that we use for network intrusion detection or for host intrusion detection in a system like this. Because if you just look at the network, you may be watching a perfectly normal traffic, but the control signals that are being sent may be such that they would even destroy the underlying physical process. A trivial example, which we usually discuss, we bring in this discussion, suppose that you have a system which includes two liquid tanks. There are two valves, and the sequence of opening of the valves has to be A first, B second, because otherwise all hell breaks loose. Okay? Now, if you look at the network, and a command is given to open B first rather than A, the network will not see anything which is abnormal, but the hell will break loose. Okay? And that's why we look at what we call physics-based or process-aware intrusion detection systems for these systems. Now, this is one before last time. I only have a slide on conclusions. It's not mine. ENISA does a very good work on this, so I borrowed this from the ENISA report on good practices. And as usual, don't only look for technological solutions. Cybersecurity solutions always are a combination of policies, organizational practices, technical practices, and so on. In fact, well, Bruce Schneier has already been quoted once today. Yep. They say that every cybersecurity lecture should have at least one Bruce Schneier quote in order to be decent. So my quote is that Bruce Schneier has said or written that all the fundamental things about cybersecurity we know, we have discovered. The problem is putting them together and apply them correctly. So we shouldn't really be looking for more technology. We should be looking for how to apply what we know efficiently. Okay. I hope I have convinced you that this convergence that we experience gives rise to serious challenges. We have not experienced those before. This is not particular to this convergence. Porting security solutions from one paradigm to another has never worked fully. But of course, it can work partially. So this is also true in this case. Securing legacy systems, I already emphasized this before, is equally important to securing our future and our modern systems because we will be living with them for long. There are several open research problems. I think they are exciting. If there are people in the audience that also find them exciting, we do have openings in NTNU at the PhD and postdoc level. You're welcome to apply. If you can live with the weather in Norway, which is not much worse than the northern of the UK, I would say, even though today Edinburgh is lovely. And this situation, as I said in the beginning, is likely to continue because we still make the same mistakes. We put insecure things together. This is good news, actually, for those of you studying cybersecurity. You will be sought after in the future, so you will have a brilliant career in front of you. So, thank you very much.
Thank you for that, Professor Katsikas. That was very interesting. We will hold questions because we're slightly short of time. We might have some time just before the break. So if you can hold questions for them.
Well, I'll be around the whole day anyway. So,
fantastic.
Yes.